Medieval torture was not about pain. It was about paperwork. The Inquisitor's manual was specific. How long? Which instruments? How many sessions? Under what circumstances the confession was legally valid? Pain was just the mechanism. The goal was a signature. Somewhere in a stone room in southern France, a notary sits at a small table. He is not there to watch. He is there to write. Every question asked, every answer given, every scream recorded, dated, filed. This was not chaos. This was procedure. And in the next room over, a priest sits behind a screen, asking a married woman what she and her husband did on a Tuesday night, and whether they enjoyed it. Both rooms answered to the same institution. Both rooms kept records. And those records survive today. Thousands of pages of them, sitting in archives, describing exactly how the church built a machine to control what happened inside people's bodies and inside their beds. This is how that machine worked. The year is 1320. The place is Montaillou, a village of roughly 250 people in the foothills of the Pyrenees. The region is nominally French, but the mountains do not care about borders. What they care about is who controls the confession booth. The streets smell of wood smoke and sheep. There is no privacy here. Houses share walls thin enough to hear an argument next door. The nearest doctor is a 2-day walk away. The nearest bishop is not. That bishop is a man named Jacques Fournier, a former shepherd's son who rose through the church to become one of the most feared inquisitors in Europe, and who would later be elected pope. Fournier does not chase heretics with a sword. He chases them with questions, thousands of them, written down word for word by a team of notaries who never stop working. The tension driving this entire region is simple. The church does not just want obedience in public. It wants access to the private. What a person believes. What a person confesses. What a person does with their spouse behind a closed door. And by the 14th century, it has built an entire legal system to extract that information and to punish anyone who withholds it. The confession was not voluntary. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council made annual confession mandatory for every Christian adult in Europe. Miss it, and you could be denied burial in consecrated ground. This single rule turned every parish priest into a permanent surveillance point. He did not just hear your sins. He kept mental records of your patterns, your neighbors, your marriage. The confessor's manual went further than belief. Priests trained using texts called summi confessorum, instruction manuals for extracting a full account of a penitent's sexual conduct. These manuals listed specific questions. Which days were forbidden for marital sex? Sundays, feast days, the 40 days of Lent. Which positions were sinful? Whether the act had been enjoyed, and how much. A married couple in this period could confess to sinning inside their own marriage for pleasure taken on the wrong night of the week. Confession became a weapon in the wrong hands. The Fournier Register, the actual surviving interrogation transcripts from Montaillou, names a parish priest called Pierre Clergue. He used what he learned in confession to identify which women in the village were unhappy, unwatched or vulnerable, and pursued them, including a noble woman named Beatrice de Planisoles, whose own testimony to Fournier's tribunal describes the pattern. The confessional was built as a tool of control. In his hands, it also became a tool of predation. The system that was supposed to protect the flock had no mechanism to protect the flock from its own shepherd. But confession was only the soft edge of the machine. What happened to people who refused to talk? That record was kept too, and it is far worse. Torture had a rulebook. By the early 14th century, inquisitors were working from procedural manuals. Bernard Gouey's Practica Inquisitionis, and later Nicolau Eymerich's Directorium Inquisitorum, laid out torture almost like a legal process. Canon law technically allowed torture only once per person. Inquisitors got around this with a legal fiction. They did not repeat the torture. They simply continued the original session, sometimes over multiple days. A notary sat in the room and wrote down every word. The paperwork was the point. A confession extracted under torture was not even considered valid unless the accused repeated it freely at least a day later with no torture in the room. On paper, this looked like a safeguard. In practice, it just meant the terror had already done its work. The system outlived its victims. Historians can read the exact words a frightened villager spoke to a bishop 700 years ago, because a notary was paid to write it all down. The church did not hide this machine. It documented it in obsessive detail, because documentation was how the machine proved it had followed its own rules. Here is the detail that should stay with you. The torture chamber and the confession booth were not separate systems. They were the same system, wearing two different faces. Both extracted information. Both were staffed by men trained in the same schools, using manuals written by the same institution. Both treated the human body and what happened to it in private as something the church had a legal right to inventory. A woman confessing what happened in her marriage bed, and a suspected heretic confessing under a stretched rope, were, procedurally, undergoing the same kind of event: interrogation, documentation, ratification. The only difference was the instrument used to get the answer, and how much pain the institution was willing to authorize to get it. That is the part modern retellings tend to soften. This was not superstition running wild. It was bureaucracy, patient, literate, methodical bureaucracy, turned toward the control of intimate life. The horror was not that the system broke down into cruelty. The horror is that the cruelty was the system, working exactly as designed, one signed confession at a time. Every surveillance system since has made the same trade the church made in the 14th century. It offers a reason, salvation, security, order, and in exchange it asks for access to the parts of your life you thought were yours alone. The inquisitors did not think of themselves as monsters. Their paperwork proves it. They filed reports. They followed procedure. They believed the records they kept were evidence of their own restraint. 700 years later, those same records are the only reason we know exactly what was done, to whom, and how. The machine that was built to control confession ended up confessing everything about itself. Somewhere in the Vatican Library right now, a page from the Fournier Register sits in a climate-controlled room, holding the exact words a terrified villager once spoke into the dark, believing no one but God would ever hear them. If you want more history they buried, subscribe. New video every day.